Hello and welcome back to the Mesopotamia series. I know it's been a while, but I've been busy with my classes and stuff, but I've managed to scrape together this episode for you, so I hope you enjoy. When we last left off, I had just finished the base work for the citadel. I had just done the ziggurat in the palace, although I had not worked on the interior details too much. I know I worked on the throne room and the dining room of the palace, but frankly it needs more detail. As you can see, the first thing I'm doing is adding gates to the citadel wall. Although it's debatable whether the average Mesopotamian is allowed within the citadel under normal circumstances, there still needs to be entrances to the citadel. This first gate here is meant to provide convenient access to the ziggurat. If you remember, the ziggurat is a temple, so people would need regular access to it. The second gate is for more direct access to the palace itself. I'm also building roads within the citadel area, and I will soon be building roads on the outside in the upper city. The roads in the upper city would likely follow the same rules as the roads in the lower city. Basically, roads that ran more north to south would likely be wider, as they were used as social spaces for gatherings, and they also received more shade in the daytime. In comparison, roads that ran east to west were exposed to the sun a lot more during the daytime, so they would likely be thinner, because they are less suitable for travel. However, in the upper city, I decided to make the roads that ran east to west a bit wider than the ones in the lower city. This is because these roads were closer to the upper city port and the citadel, making them very important. In the background, you can see that I've added trees in the citadel to sort of decorate it, and it's out of sight, but I also added ponds and some vegetation. The building I'm constructing next is the upper city barracks. You see, there are a lot of buildings that would ordinarily go inside of the citadel in the upper city. However, in my build, I couldn't fit them. I mentioned this briefly last episode. The barracks is one of those buildings. It would probably be within the citadel. However, since I couldn't fit it in there, I'm going to put it right outside. Some buildings that likely would have gone inside the citadel as well include additional temples, residences for officials and priests, and some of the buildings I'll be getting to next. The structure I'm creating next is the Royal Forge. This one is a bit of an improvisation. Although I have a good idea of what a Mesopotamian forge would look like, I do not have any evidence as to how the Mesopotamians manufactured the bronze and iron weapons for their armies. So basically that leaves me with two options. Either someone commercially produced the weapons and the army bought them, or they had their own royal forge, and I'm assuming they had their own royal forge or supplier at this point. Of course, there were craftsmen who would make bronze tools for, the average person to use, but I don't know if this applied to weapons. The third building I'm creating here is the upper city's granary. I already made a granary for the lower city, but a granary in the upper city makes more sense because the priests had the control over the grain in each city-state, and the upper city is where the priests would typically live. I'm basing this granary off of reliefs from a college thesis that I found online. Please bear with me, I'm not good at building domes, it seems, but that's what I built. I'm also building the upper city port, but it is very similar to the lower city port. Now I'm building tents and tarps just like I did in the lower city to indicate trade. Although the craftsmen and merchants would probably live in the lower city, of course the upper city still has to trade. I realize I'm doing something a bit different by actually showing you perspective while I'm building, but just in case anyone was wondering, I wanted to show off how I'm building these tents. I'm actually using barrier blocks and then putting carpet on top of them, so the tarp actually looks very thin. I don't have to use wool blocks, but there is actually a block beneath it. For the final building over here, I'm actually building a brewery. A citadel would probably have a brewery in it, just because everyone in the palace needs something to drink, and beer is pretty much the only option, unless you want to get some waterborne disease. This brewery also features two grain silos on the back, but they're probably not the silos you're thinking of. Silos can actually be buried in the ground according to the definition, and Mesopotamians stored their grain in this fashion. I realize that the brewery kind of looks bland, and I'll be touching on that in a second. So after I build these stairs up to the wall, I decided that I would start working on the housing of the upper city. Alright, so as you can tell, I got the resource pack that I've been using for some of the photos I've been taking. I'm finally using it for the recordings now. Even though it kind of takes a toll on my computer, I decided that it's probably best that I use it just so everything looks a bit nicer. Of course, this is the upper city, so I'll be changing things around a little bit. In the lower city, I had like a certain palette of colors and a few set styles of building. In the upper city, that'll all change. For one thing, housing with more than one floor was much more common in the upper city. And as you can see, the first house I'm building in the upper city has 2 floors. As for the next house, you see me start building it, but then I stop. So let me go and elaborate on what I was talking about earlier. So I wanted to change the color palette and building style of the upper city, since the wealthy citizens of the upper city would probably be able to afford better building materials, larger houses, and other things to make their houses look nicer, like colored enamels. So I started building the second house, but I realized I was using dull regular terracotta, which is fine for the lower city, the poor farmers' houses. However, the upper city, I felt like it didn't really fit. I tried adding colored concrete and colored terracotta to spice it up, but it just wasn't working. You can see me trying to experiment by putting the red concrete on the normal terracotta house, but I felt like it just didn't work. I could have kept building more houses out of orange terracotta with cyan concrete trims, just like the palace in the first house I've built here, but I felt like having everything matching with no variety just wouldn't cut it. I started experimenting, and the next 3 houses are experimental, so I want you guys to tell me what you think in the comments. But I thought they were alright, which is why I'm including them in this video. This first house I'm building right here, I built out of white terracotta and light blue terracotta. I'm pretty satisfied with it. The next building is just a plain house, it's just a square, but I was experimenting with the cyan concrete and the yellow concrete design. But I soon decided I would switch out the cyan concrete for light blue terracotta because I thought the house reminded me of, I don't know, something. Well, let's move on. As far as the final product, I thought the house looked alright, but it kind of looked more like a Greek house than a Mesopotamian house. But tell me what you guys think. And then I said I was staying away from the light gray terracotta, but I decided that maybe light gray terracotta with white terracotta might be a good color combination. I thought the color scheme was alright, but I didn't know if it communicated Upper City Mesopotamian very well, and I thought that the actual design of the house was subpar. Anyway, like I said, tell me what you think of these housing designs in the comments. I know it's been a little while since I posted anything like this, but I'm going to be calling it here, so if you enjoyed, please leave a like, please leave a comment, maybe even subscribe, and I'll see you in whatever I post next.